Welcome to the WJBM Outdoor Show, brought to you by Midwest Tractor Sales in Jerseyville. We're coming to you from the WJBM studios in Jerseyville, the voice of the Tri-Counties. I'm Aaron Quillan. I operate Monarch Rivers, where the mission is simple: kill big deer. And today we have a great guest, so excited, Don Higgins from Chasing Giants.
Thanch for having me.
Thank you for being here.
Yeah, you know, I've done a lot of work over in Western Illinois over the years, and it's been a little bit since I've been here, so good to be back.
Awesome. Okay. Where, what areas have you done some work over here?
You name it. I've done a lot in Pike County, Calhoun, Jersey.
Okay.
Adams, Brown.
Awesome.
Basically everywhere on the western side of the state. I've probably been there multiple times.
Okay. And so you do a lot of consulting work.
Right. Yeah, I started a consulting business. It's probably been close to 20 years ago now. And so I started my career as an outdoor writer.
Okay.
I wrote a lot of magazine articles for like North American whitetail, deer and deer hunting and such. And there were some readers that liked what I was saying, I guess, and they'd reached out to me about helping them on their properties. And I'd never thought about doing such a thing, but from a couple of requests, got the ball rolling. And today we probably do... Well, today I personally do around 70 to 80 properties a year across the country. I've been as far west as the Dakotas, Nebraska, Kansas, and I've been as far east as, the entire East Coast. I've done work in New Jersey, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, Connecticut, New York, Pennsylvania a lot. So I've gotten around, and today I've actually got 6 other consultants working under me. So they'll go and do the property visits and such, and then they send the plans to me, and I'll review the plans before the client sees them and say, why did you do this? Why did you not do that? And then we send them to the clients. And we do all of us together, we do about 300 properties a year.
Wow. That's amazing.
Yeah. Well, I never dreamed it would come to this, but I say all the time, God's reality is bigger than anything you can dream, and I'm living proof of that.
I'm into that.
Yeah.
So with regard to your management and consulting, what are some of the things that you find here in Illinois that seem to be troublesome for a lot of different farmers or hunters?
Well, I think the way the state has managed the deer herd over the years has really been a disaster. Mm-hmm. At one time when I was much younger, the Illinois deer herd was the best deer herd on the planet, even better than Iowa. You know, today Iowa was thought of as having the best deer herd on the planet, but back in the 90s, Illinois absolutely blew away Iowa. And you know, it's just been a series of poor regulation changes. It's been it can't all be put on the DNR either. Some of that is the legislature has passed laws that the DNR is forced to follow and kind of tied their hands on some issues. Mm-hmm. So there's plenty of blame to go around. I think the hunters get some blame as well. Mm-hmm. I think the hunters are a disorganized, clustered mess. Everybody seems to have their own ideas, and they're not willing to compromise, and that's probably the biggest hurdle that I see for Illinois right now to ever become a great whitetail state again, because they're not now. The fact of the matter is, today Illinois is living on its past reputation. It's not attracting hunters from around the country because it's great. It's just attracting hunters from around the country because of its past reputation, and the word is slowly spreading. People are learning that Illinois is not what it once was, and it's going to continue down the toilet. And I think there's an opportunity to salvage that, mm-hmm. but there's going to have to be different various interest groups come to the table, and they're going to have to come with an open mind. They're going to have to come to the table with the idea that they need to compromise. And those groups, you know, a huge group is the farmers. The farmers own the land where these deer live.
Right.
The hunters got to work with the farmer. It's got to be a plan that's good for them. The DNR is responsible for making the regulations. They need to be at that table. The legislature, there needs to be some key legislators at that table that are willing to take our ideas and pass them into law. And then the deer hunter last. Again, if I had to put the most blame on any group, I put it on the deer hunter, because the deer hunter has been just a disorganized mess without any willingness to compromise. And I think, and to be honest, I was probably as guilty as anyone at one time. And as I've gotten older, I just turned 62 last week. So with age comes wisdom. And I realized that there's a lot of different groups that have to come together, and you gotta be mindful of what these other groups want out of the relationship. Mm-hmm. And nobody's been able to bring those groups together and come up with a solution to make Illinois the home of the world's greatest deer herd once again. And it could be done with just a few regulation changes, but we got to get everybody on board.
Yeah, I agree with that. When I look at Illinois, I look at, I do think this is the best place for a whitetail, hands down, because we have tremendous areas of habitat that those particular habitats, I don't know if you find many other places. Typically areas along great rivers or where there's, essentially not just every shelter belt's been bulldozed in, everything's, and by having that habitat here, Illinois has been able to produce as many, if not more, record whitetail than any other state.
Right. I mean, Wisconsin is known for having the most Boone and Crockett bucks, but a Boone and Crockett buck's 170 inches.
Right.
They produce a lot of 170-inch deer because they got a lot of deer. Right. And when it comes to the real giants, the 200-plus, Illinois is right there with anybody. And the great habitat is covering the entire state almost. I mean, there's a pocket up around Champaign where it's really wide open ag prairie where there's not a lot of cover. Mm-hmm. But other than that, the rest of the state, you can go clear up north, get into Joe Davies County, clear down to the southern tip of Illinois. You got the Mississippi River following the western boundary of the state. That's all great habitat. You got the Illinois River coming in there. That's all great habitat. You've got a lot of other rivers, the Kaskaskia, the Embraw. Then you got on the east side of the state, you got the Wabash, and all those little tributaries coming off of those major rivers. It's all fantastic deer habitat. There's probably not another state in the union that has as many acres of great deer habitat as what Illinois has. Mm-hmm. And it's just really sad that we are not the home of the greatest deer herd on the planet.
Yeah. What do you think's been some of the most contributing factors? Like, is it the tag allocation? What is it? Are people shooting the wrong deer?
Well, it's been a series of blunders, in my opinion, by multiple. I'm not going to just point at the DNR because there's multiple people that have made mistakes, including deer hunters. But back, I'm trying to think back how long ago it was now, but it was probably the late 90s, I'm going to guess. I was part of a group known as the Illinois Bowhunter Society, which was mm-hmm. a representative group that basically had a open line of communications with the DNR. Right. And we tried to do things to make the deer hunting in Illinois better, to improve mm-hmm. it. And I was at a meeting in Decatur, Illinois, and there was a biologist from the DNR that came to meet with our group. And he basically said, almost word for word, that we are here to manage numbers. We're not looking at quality. Mm-hmm. He said, this is exactly how he put it. He said, at the beginning of the fall, early in the fall, in Illinois, there's X number of deer. We want to bring that number down to Y number of deer by the end of the year, after the hunting seasons are over. How we get there, we don't care. We don't care if those deer are shot with a gun or a bow or what's used, and we don't care which deer are shot. We don't care if they're all fawns or all mature bucks or all does. We just want to get from point A to point B number-wise. Yeah. And my response was, you guys have no concern about age structure or sex ratios with your harvest strategy. Nope, we don't care about those things. All we care about is taking this herd from this number down to this number, and that's all they're managing for. And that was not always the case. There was a lot of if you really go back in history to like the 1950s and 60s, Illinois was home to a couple of great deer biologists, Forrest Loomis and Jack Calhoun.
Okay.
They are the ones that created the great Illinois deer herd, and they did some things that had never been done before in the management of whitetails. And those two things were, first of all, the either sex season. At that point in the 1950s, when modern deer hunting came back to Illinois and was open because, the herd had been wiped out, and they came back to the point where they could open a season in the 1950s, they introduced either sex seasons. And across the country at that time, all deer seasons were buck only, but those were protected. Nobody, that's where we got the idea, and we're getting past that now, but you don't shoot does.
Right.
And that started way back traditionally, back in the 50s, or even before that in some states. So those guys were the first ones to introduce an either sex season. That happened right here in Illinois by those two biologists. The other thing they did was they micromanaged. Other states were managing either by the whole state. They'd have regulations that covered the entire state, or giant regions within the state, like management units. Well, these guys were far-sighted enough that they have managed they started this. Nobody else in the country was doing it at the time. They started managing by county. So like every county has so many gun tags available. Every county, the seasons don't change too much. And we pretty much stayed with that, I got to give the DNR credit. They have stuck with that county by county. But that was first introduced in Illinois as well by those two biologists. They created the planet's best deer herd that's ever been there.
Right.
And after those guys retired and were gone, subsequent biologists, and it's not just the biologists, it was the legislature, and they just eroded at what those guys had created. And today I wouldn't even put Illinois in probably, well, I would put Iowa's better than Illinois. Kansas is probably better than Illinois. Ohio is better than Illinois. And then you got a group with Illinois. You could probably put Illinois, Indiana, Wisconsin, maybe even Kentucky in like a second tier.
Right.
And what bothers me and a lot of other folks that are interested in the Illinois deer herd is that with just a few regulation changes, Illinois could be head and shoulders above anybody else that's out there, including Iowa.
Right. So one thing that's interesting to me is there appear to be some pockets in Illinois that are still thriving, but overall, in aggregate, it's really tapered down, and like you say, living on its past reputation.
Absolutely. So where there are pockets of great deer hunting left in the state, and there is some pockets of great deer hunting left, they're very isolated. It's where private land ownership has taken the ball and run with it. Okay. It's like, okay, DNR's not going to help us. And it brings up a very interesting topic that I think a lot of your listeners have probably never even considered, but fences are coming to the Midwest in a big way.
Okay.
I know a gentleman who quit a good government job to start a fence building business just for deer hunters. And the state is not helping a landowner have a quality deer herd to hunt.
Right.
And so guys are taking the ball and running with it themselves. If they've got a bad neighbor on one side, boom, there goes a fence.
Yeah.
And that neighbor is no longer a bad neighbor. And, if you think of the Midwest, if you think of Texas, things happen in Texas way ahead of the rest of the country.
Agreed.
Deer management was big in Texas way before it came to the Midwest.
Yeah.
Hunting leases. I remember when I was in my 20s, there was no such thing as a hunting lease in Illinois. People never even heard of leasing ground for hunting. Today, everything is leased up.
Yeah.
It started in Texas.
Okay.
High fences started in Texas, been there forever. High fences are coming to the Midwest.
Yeah.
And if these state agencies don't get involved and start managing for quality, then we're going to see fences everywhere in 10 years. Mark my words on it. 10, 20 years from now, there's going to be high fences everywhere across the Midwest.
I agree with that.
And I don't particularly like to see it.
No.
I wish the state would manage better so landowners didn't have to do that. But the key to having older age class deer, big deer, is we got to get age on them. They got to survive. And if you've got a neighbor next to you that's shooting every little deer that comes across the line, there's really only one way to deal with it. If the government the DNR, the regulations are not going to stop it. Guess what? The private individual is going to stop it.
Right. Exercising their property owner rights.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, we're going to take a quick break and hear a word from our sponsors, and we'll be right back. Welcome back to the WJBM Outdoor Show, brought to you by Midwest Tractor Sales in Jerseyville. We're coming to you from the WJBM studios in Jerseyville, the voice of the Tri-Counties. I'm Aaron Quillan. I operate Monarch Rivers, where the mission is simple: kill big deer. And if you're just joining us, our guest is Don Higgins, chasing giants. And we were just talking about basically neighbors and management, and potentially the future of what we're seeing is fences coming up, restricting those neighbors. Well, as we talk about that, what do you think from your management background and from what you've seen as you know, decades of hunting and just getting better every day, right? Because, man, I can't imagine I've been doing the outfitting and the hunting in Calhoun for about 25 years. And when I see someone like you with the amount of experience that you have, I just want to sponge all that up. And you've probably forgotten more than I've learned in 25 years.
Well, I don't know about that. I mean, you seem pretty knowledgeable about what you're doing. But
Well, I mean, I like to think I pay attention, but when we talk about the topics of neighbors and how do you be a good neighbor, that means the world to me, because we'll get to it. But part of being organized and part of rallying the troops, if you will, starts with being good neighbors.
Absolutely. So I'm a Christian, and I believe in being a good neighbor anytime you possibly can.
Yeah.
The last thing I want to do is build a fence against a neighbor.
Right.
But when you invest hundreds of thousands of dollars, maybe in some cases, some guys I know have invested millions of dollars into hunting properties. And you build a cabin on that property. You've hired local contractors to clear food plots to build your cabin. You've shopped at local implement dealers, and you bought a tractor to plant your food plots, and you've done all that, put all this money out. And your neighbor, either themselves or they allow someone to come hunt their property, and that person sits right on your line and just ruins everything that you've worked for. And they've put nothing into it, really. All they've done is gone to Walmart and bought a deer tag.
Right.
And probably don't even own the land. They're probably there by permission.
Right.
And they want to just set your fence and shoot every deer that crosses. Can you blame that guy for building a fence? I mean, that's
not at all.
And it's a minor expense. That guy he's invested millions of dollars, probably over $1 million anyway, in most cases, to chase his dream.
Right.
And then some guy sits there and ruins that dream, and all it's going to take is, another $20, $30, $40 to $1,000 to put that fence up. That's a minor expense in the whole grand scheme of things. And the reason those fences have got to be there is because you've got to keep those bucks alive. You've got to get them alive to older age classes.
Right.
And you got to do whatever you can to keep them alive, and that's what the fence is for. It's not to shut the other guy off. It's to keep those bucks alive. We would much rather be a good neighbor, but when your neighbor isn't on the same page, and this goes back to what I was saying earlier, the deer hunters are just, everybody's got a different opinion, and nobody can set their opinion aside for the other guy, and look at things from their perspective. The farmer, for example, last year on my farm, I've got a neighbor that had a cornfield that butted right up to me, and my neighbor, I noticed it myself. He never said a word to me about it, but the deer that were staying on my place probably wiped out about 3 acres of his corn.
Okay.
And so last fall, just to be a good neighbor, we shot more than double the number of deer that I've ever shot on my place, because I don't want them destroying my neighbor's crops.
Yeah.
And what we all got to do is we all got to be responsible stewards of the resource that we've been given, but at the same time, we got to be good neighbors with someone who has a totally different idea.
Right.
My neighbor doesn't care if he ever sees a deer in his field.
Right.
But I want to see plenty, and I want to see big ones. So I think I've got a good relationship with probably all my neighbors, really.
Yeah.
So I just, we got to shift gears. The management of this state it's going down the toilet, as I've said, and every one of us needs to step back, and I'm talking deer hunters first and foremost, but also farmers, DNR, legislator. Let's all listen to each other and come up with a compromise, because I think if those four groups came together and sat at a table, we could come up with a management plan for the state's deer herd that it impacts everyone in a positive way, including the state of Illinois. I think the state of Illinois could make more money off of their deer herd if it was well managed than what it is today. So it's a win-win-win-win for every group there. But the question is, who's going to bring those folks to the table?
Well, it's got to start somewhere. And
Yeah.
that's 100% why I called you, right? When I first called you, I heard you on the Whitetails podcast. And, I thought that I wanted to know more about your perspective and your opinion. Interestingly enough, my key takeaway was, well, the biggest lobby in the state is the Farm Bureau.
Yep.
And I thought, and I think I texted you the next day, I'm going in front of our local Farm Bureau, next month.
Uh-huh.
And, what's interesting to me is we have some different organizations that are acting independently. And each of these organizations have incredible power with data, and data is what drives decisions. So the Farm Bureau is collecting data. The Illinois DNR, their biologists, regardless of what's trickled down, you got people that are passionate about what they do. They're collecting very relevant data. And hunters, as unorganized as we are, and as much as we don't want to share information with that bad neighbor, we probably have more data than anyone. We have more hours in the field. We have more resources in terms of trail cameras. You got these young men, Jack, who's going around with the drone and doing deer surveys. We have technology at our fingertips, but we're kind of holding it tight to the vest. And then who is the platform that's going to take the lead and say, hey, we're going to fill the need, and we're going to organize and rally the troops so our voices can be heard. And it just seems like that there are some elements of that are missing right now.
Yep. Well, earlier this year, there was a bill introduced to basically make it easier for a landowner to get nuisance tags to shoot deer that are, for crop depredation. It was introduced actually by my state senator.
Okay.
And whenever I seen that bill come up, and I seen there was a video of my state senator making the argument, and he did a fantastic job. I would have loved to debated him, don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
Because I think I could have tore some of his arguments apart.
Right.
But he did a fantastic job debating that to get people to vote for it, and it passed unanimously.
Wow.
Well, when I seen that video, I instantly fired off an email to him, my state senator, and my state rep.
Okay.
And I asked them to organize a meeting with the Farm Bureau and them being the representatives from the legislature. And I would represent the deer hunters and bring somebody in from DNR. Let's all sit down at the table, because there's a solution here that everybody could not only live with, but everybody could benefit from. But the problem is getting those folks to the table. Who's going to get them to the table? I got zero response from my state senator and my state rep. They didn't even reply to my email.
In the investigating that I've done, I guess you could call it investigating, that seems to be the way that bureaucracy is working right now in Illinois, from the top all the way down. And one of the things that I've tried to find is, who are these organizations with lobby power, right? You've got Safari Club. They lobby at a federal and state level. You've got I4, which lobbies at a state level. And I think they do an excellent job. None of these organizations are species specific. I know that there's a gentleman from Whitetails that sits on I4's board. But how do we get all the email addresses in one place? How do we get an opportunity to create awareness, to promote some education, to just, hey, even an approach of faith or community. This is how we can be good neighbors to each other. Mm-hmm. And then there's so much data in that. How do we compare the data? And I'm falling up short.
Well, some of those organizations that you mentioned, like I4, for example, when I was involved with the Illinois Bowhunter Society, they were a member of I4. Mm-hmm. Jim McFarlane was he was on the board of directors with myself and several others on the Illinois Bowhunter Society, but he was also very active with I4.
Yeah.
And so I'm very familiar with him. And I believe when I was kind of like getting uninvolved due to frustration years ago,
right.
I think that's when Scotty Bryant was coming on. And I really enjoyed the interview that you had with him.
Okay, thank you.
I'd heard his name before, but I'd never seen him or heard him talk. But it sounds like him and I have a lot in common as far as our backgrounds.
Okay.
Came from humble beginnings, and
yes, sir.
We're both very passionate. But the issue with I4 is they're trying to represent a huge group of people, and that huge group of people often have different interests or opposite interests. So, for example, you take a bait. I think a bait is a member of I4, and they were the ones that were fighting for these ATV trails, and I think it was Sahara Woods.
Okay.
And deer hunters were opposed to it. They don't want ATVs running around. So how does I4 represent anybody when you got two groups that they represent that have totally opposite views on the same issue?
Right.
Now, I do believe there's a place for I4. And there are plenty of issues where they could represent everybody because we're all on the same page.
Rewilding bill.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's a can of worms right there.
Right.
I got my own opinions about, but anyway, yeah. So, but I think the key, I4 needs to be at that table as well. They need to be at that table with the Farm Bureau and the hunters and the DNR and all that. And we need to come up with a comprehensive bill passed by the legislature that addresses a whole lot of things. And another thing I think that needs to happen is there is no significant punishment now when you break a game law. Okay. I mean, CPOs, they've got one of the toughest jobs out there. Just think of how hard it is to catch somebody in the backwoods of nowhere breaking a game law. And these guys are out there, at all hours of the day and night by themselves with who knows what kind of criminal. And they finally catch somebody. And then what happens? Most of the time, the state's attorney or the judge does that. They look at it like, it's just a game law violation. Who cares? So I think the CPOs need to be at that table. There's just a lot of groups that I think could make a positive contribution. And then we have a comprehensive bill. And as part of that bill, if you break certain game laws, the punishment needs to be a lot more severe than it is today. I mean, if you are blatantly doing things like shooting deer out of your truck with a rifle at night with a spotlight,
right,
you don't need to be hunting for 5 years on the first offense,
right,
and life on the second. And that's not an exaggeration. That's how I feel about it.
I agree.
So, there's a handful of people that need to be at that table, and I think I4 is one of them.
Yeah. Yeah, what it comes down to is what I've learned from doing the WJBM Outdoor Show is that we have very little voice as hunters in Illinois. There's such a disparity, something like 10 million people in Chicago and 2.5 million in the rest of downstate Illinois. So there's a huge disparity there. And if you're from Chicago and you don't participate in hunting, fishing, anything, even people from Chicago that are into hiking and nature and outdoors are still potentially allies. But then there's a large population that just doesn't care, oblivious, has no idea what, is actually going on or what these, species friendly, things that they're trying to do really are.
Yeah, I mean, that's just Illinois politics at its finest. The good thing about Illinois politics, if there is any good thing, is that a lot of the downstate sheriffs, state's attorneys,
Yeah.
they are as much against the Chicago politics as the rest of us. And there is a big difference between downtown Chicago and downstate Illinois. And I'll give you a good example. So the Bobcats here in Illinois, we were screaming downstate for years that we need a Bobcat pop. They were protected. You couldn't shoot them. And finally they opened up, and as some sort of compromise, probably with the Chicago Democrats, they decided that we could only have, I think it was 500 tags when the season first started. And that wasn't 500 Bobcats being killed. That was 500 people that got to hunt. Well, I can promise you that when that Bobcat season opened, for every legal Bobcat shot, there was probably between 5 and 10 illegal shot. If they think they're going to turn loose wolves and bears and mountain lions, and downstate is just going to sit there and live with it, they got another thing coming. More common sense out in the country, and that's not going to fly.
I can see that. I can definitely see that. It's interesting where we're at right now. We've seen some issues with regard to management at a legislative, level, and now we are potentially facing, wolves. That's the one I'm most concerned about is wolves.
They'll never survive where I'm at. I mean, in southern Illinois, where you've got a lot more timber and rougher country, yeah, they may, but I still think that they'll be brought under control.
Yeah, I hope so, because there's a lot of people's livelihoods that depend on that.
Well, they've got the wolves protected, like up in northern Wisconsin and such, and they've really decimated the deer herd there. But the human population up there and the amount of cover is so much different than it is in downstate Illinois. I've got no doubt that. And here's the other thing: how much money are we going to spend to reintroduce these species? So this government is just this state government is totally out of control. And the way they spend money and the way they tax people, and we're going to spend those tax dollars to trap some bears from wherever and bring them to Illinois and turn them loose. Well, that is total nonsense.
It doesn't make sense, especially since, not too long ago, we just had a bear come through Calhoun and go on into, I think, St. Charles area,
right,
moving through.
And, we've had mountain lions, and usually they're always young males, trying to find their new home range or whatever. We've had mountain lions here in Illinois.
Yeah.
Had one here that was just shot outside of Springfield that came all the way from Nebraska. It came right through Iowa.
Okay.
It was actually radio collared.
Okay.
In Nebraska. Came through Iowa, crossed the river, came into Illinois, and just kept going. And finally, they ended up shooting it right outside of Springfield. That wasn't that long ago, maybe 3 years ago.
Yeah, I think I remember that. So it's not like they don't come here anyways.
Right.
But in terms of bringing in females, trying to establish populations, it doesn't make a lot of sense. So with the overall, you've got a lot of experience with regard to trying to create a voice and speak to the DNR or various legislators. What do you see being the first step in the rally of how do we get a voice, and how do we maybe, start to collect those emails? How do we start to get, I've worked with Safari Club. We've got a huge population of Metro East, and then even up to here. These people should be participating with the SCI Gateway Area Chapter. I mean, if you release a bear in Illinois, it's going to go to Missouri and vice versa. Even if we had some types of relationships over in Indiana that felt the same way, they have lobbyists. I4 has lobbyists. How do we do a better job, creating, it's almost like a market share. It's underserved. How do we get more people in this market share to understand, hey, these laws are being made. This is drastically affecting our enjoyment of our own property, of our own heritage, of our own sporting. Do you have any thoughts on what the first step is there?
Yeah, and to be honest, so I butted heads with DNR big time back in the day.
Right.
I made some enemies at DNR. I am probably enemy number one on DNR's list.
Okay.
So I am probably not the best person to try to approach DNR. And to be honest, I tried for 20 years and I'm just about burned out on the whole thing anyway. But I think the starting point is the farmer. The Illinois Farm Bureau is the most powerful lobby in the state of Illinois. I think the farmer and the Farm Bureau is the key. And I think if the right person sit down with the Farm Bureau, even if these other parties are not at the first meeting at the table,
right,
and presented a case and said, this is what we would like to do, and this is how it's going to benefit the Illinois farmer. I think then at that point, that coalition between the Farm Bureau and whoever meets with them, whether it be me or somebody else, could take the ball and introduce new parties like I-4, bring them in.
Right. So almost anybody listening or anybody that watches this on YouTube, reach out to your local Farm Bureau. Talk to them, hey, we're a hunter. We'd like representation. We feel that we have enough common ground with farmers in terms of maximizing the land's potential. We would like to join the organization. We would like to, have a voice here within the Farm Bureau.
Well, I think there's even financial benefits for the farmer, and that's what it really comes down to in a lot of cases. A farmer, any deer on his farm is eating crops.
Yes.
To some degree. So he'll tolerate a little bit of that. But when it gets to a certain point, he's no longer going to tolerate it. Just like a deer hunter's not going to tolerate his neighbor shooting every little buck that crosses the line.
Right.
A farmer's not going to tolerate these deer coming out in the herds eating his crops.
Right.
So I think that if a comprehensive program was laid out to revamp the management of the Illinois deer herd, and we could show financial incentive and benefit for the Illinois farmer, then we could get them on board and the Farm Bureau on board, and then we could take it to the next step. And there is. I mean, I've sat in my tree stand and drove down the road thousands of miles thinking about what needs to be done to this state to make it better,
right?
And in a way that benefits every party. And I've got some ideas. I'm not going to throw them out here because everybody will start picking them apart before they're really presented properly.
Right, that's fine.
But I mean, it's a win-win. And even the state, like I said before, even the state could benefit from more income off of the Illinois deer herd. The farmer could benefit financially.
Right.
The deer hunter benefits because he's got a more well-balanced deer herd with a better age structure and better sex ratios. Not you see 50 does out in this field and there ain't a buck in sight.
Right.
We're talking about a well-managed deer herd benefits everyone.
Right. I think, even from a local level, as deer hunters, if you're a leaseholder or a neighbor, you've got to share some of that trail cam data. If you are out there and you're seeing 10 raccoons and 10 deer, they're possibly doing the same damage. And if the farmer is not aware of that, and we have the data to make them aware of that, I think that's a great start.
Well, I think a lot of times the farmer blames deer for damage that the raccoons are doing. No doubt about it. Absolutely no doubt about it. And as far as sharing trail camera data, I just made a post this morning.
Oh, nice.
If you go to my Facebook page and you'll see a trail camera photo that I shared of a doe and a fawn. And basically I was talking about fawn recruitment and how on my place it seems to be way down this year. I think the coyotes and the bobcats together are having a real impact on my farm. I'm not saying statewide, but on my farm. And I was kind of asking for input, from others, what they're seeing on their property. So the other evening I was sitting on a double crop soybeans, sitting on the edge of that field, going to film some velvet bucks, and had 6 does came out. They didn't come out together. One came out here, another one over there, then a group of 4 came out. There was not a single fawn with any of those 6 does, not one. And I'm seeing a lot of my trail cameras, I'm getting photos of does with no fawns. And I'm not seeing the fawns I typically do in the summertime.
Okay.
And I attribute that to the predators. That's not mismanagement by the DNR or anything like that. But I don't think that what I'm seeing on my farm probably reflects the whole state. It's isolated to my area. And I asked for some input, and haven't seen what kind of replies I got yet, but I'm sure I got several.
Okay. All right. Your trail cams, are you seeing a lot of coyotes and other predators?
I've seen several, yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
I was just going through some trail cams trying to match up a buck that popped up on one of my cell cams and you know, age, you know, trying to get a better establishment. And there was a monster bobcat on there. And I don't know if I had gone through those photos and deleted yet or not. I was just quickly going through it, but this thing was a monster. And, you know, they can eat fawns.
Absolutely.
They can take down deer if necessary. Deep snow tends to be an asset for some of these predators.
Right.
Now, when we're talking about trail cams, you have a crazy amount of cameras that you use. I just watched you did a review for Reconyx and WiseEye.
Right.
You have how many cameras that you use?
Oh, I think at the moment I've got around 55 of them.
Okay. How do you deal with all those pictures?
Well, it's not easy.
No.
So I got to keep a spreadsheet on locations of these cameras. So I got, you know, every camera listed, location, and I got next to it, I got the last date that I checked that camera. So
Okay.
I remember, it's been 3 months since I seen that one. I better go check it or whatever.
Right.
And it's a continual process. I mean, every week I probably spend, I would say a minimum 3 out of 7 days I'm checking trail cameras somewhere.
Okay.
But I've got them scattered, you know, across several counties, and
Yeah.
just always looking for that big buck. And you know, them big bucks are getting harder and harder to find. It used to be that there was about 150-inch buck on every section, and then there was some bigger ones scattered throughout as well. Well, that's not the case anymore. It's taken a real hit the last few years.
One of the things that used to drive me nuts was I basically had to buy a new SD card every time I went to change it out, because you had all these pictures, you have all this information for sex ratio to, you know, trying to capture it, but then there's such little time to do it. So what I did is I went out and I bought an external hard drive.
Yep.
And I take my laptop into the field, I dump it onto the hard drive, and then I can skim it, and then it's all there. So right now, I feel like I've got like 35,000 pictures on a hard drive. That's incredible data. I don't know how I'm going to go through it all.
Yeah. It just takes time. And, I used to use the Reconyx software, which they no longer have, and you could put it on motion. So you could just sit there and it would flip through pictures, and you didn't even have to click.
Okay.
And you could change the speed, and you can get it real fast. And when you see a nice buck, you stop it.
Right.
and then you go back and you check him out. And if you want to save that picture, you know, you mark it, and then you go on until you're at the end of the card, and then it would automatically save any pictures that you'd marked.
Okay.
That software no longer works. So this year I'm in a transition phase, and I'm where you're at. I'm like scrolling through thousands of pictures and trying to find the ones I want to keep. And
Yeah. And then each camera company has a different software.
right.
So I've got 3 different cell cam softwares that I have to remember to look at. You know, that favorite button seems to be nice, and it's easy to, you know, look at your phone and say, ooh, piece of candy, big buck.
Yep.
But the having the ability for like a slideshow.
Right.
That way you can eat your breakfast and just watch. You aren't sitting there clicking every picture. But it's hours. I talked to a biologist, the guy that does Buck Commander, DJ, and I asked him the same question. He's like, we just have to spend the hours, and There's,
I spend hours every week.
yeah.
Yep.
Maybe AI will come in and help us. Well, we're going to take another break and hear a word from our sponsors. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the WJBM Outdoor Show, brought to you by Midwest Tractor Sales in Jerseyville. We're coming to you from the WJBM studios in Jerseyville, the voice of the Tri-Counties. I'm Aaron Quillan. I operate Monarch Rivers, where the mission is simple: kill big deer. And if you're just joining us, Chasing Giants, Don Higgins is in the house. And we've been talking about a lot of different things, from management to trail cams. And Don, I hate to put you on the spot, but something interesting. One of my buddies that was we just grew up fishing together, hunting, and he recently lost his father. And as we were kind of talking and just, going through that situation, I mentioned, hey, Don Higgins is going to be on. And he was the first person that ever turned me on to your podcast and what was going on there. So I asked him if he had any questions. And then he came back, any questions to ask you. He came back with some pretty good questions. So I don't want to put you on the spot, but I'm gonna read them and hopefully you have some good feedback.
Okay.
He says, ask him what the youngest 200-inch deer he has seen, hunted, or watched grow is.
Well, the buck I shot Mel, I shot him in 2020.
Okay.
In 2019, he was a 3-year-old.
Okay.
And he scored. I got his sheds, found his sheds. Mm-hmm. I had him, I don't remember how many. I passed him either 3 times or 5 times that fall.
Okay.
But he ended up scoring 216.
Wow.
As a 3-year-old. And that's super rare, and there's people that are going to argue with me he wasn't 3. But that's one buck I watched grow up on my farm from the time he was 1.5 years old. At 1.5, he had a 10-point rack.
Okay.
A little tiny thing. I mean, the main beam the base was no bigger than your thumb at the very most.
Okay.
And but I watched him grow up. I know it's the same buck. 3 years old, 216 inches.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so it's possible, and it's been proven that sometimes at 3.5 they throw their biggest rack. Mm-hmm. You just never know whether it be, I guess, would it be stress? What would be the circumstances that cause that? Do you
know? It's all genetics.
Okay.
It's just like the kid that's 6 foot tall in the 8th grade.
Okay.
It doesn't happen very often, but when it does, it's because his dad is probably 6'6" or 6'8".
Okay.
It's all genetic.
Okay. Do you, it says here, maybe if he is shot and tooth-aged and realized the years before his sheds were 200 at a younger age. So do you do much of the teeth aging when you?
Very little. I think I've done it maybe once or twice.
Okay.
But
okay. So most of your age is based off of observation and history with a whitetail.
It's almost all history. So I don't think that you can look at a picture of a mature deer and tell how old he is.
Okay.
I do believe you can tell yearlings, obviously. You can tell 2-year-olds for the most part. I mean, every once in a while one may fool you, but the vast majority of the time you're going to know a 2-year-old. Once they get 3 and older, it becomes really tricky.
Yes.
And time of the year, I mean, in the summertime, it's really difficult because they've all got the thin necks, and they're not bulked up or anything. In the fall, it becomes a little bit easier, but even then, I think, you see these, how old is this buck on the internet all the time. And I think most people are probably guessing wrong at least half of the time. Mm-hmm. And to be honest, I would be guessing wrong most of the time. I just don't think there's any way for any of us to know. And I say that because I want to say that if I ever throw out the age of a buck, it's because I've watched him grow up from a young age.
Okay.
I knew that, hey, I get his first picture back in whatever year. He was a 2.5-year-old then. I could tell he was 2.5.
Right.
Now it's X number of years later. That makes him whatever today.
Okay.
If I throw out a buck's age, it's because I got history with him. It's not some blind guess.
Well, I found trying to explain age structure to hunters, I used to think for the longest time that the difference between a 2 and a 3 was more difficult to tell in the years. Mm-hmm. Now I think it's between 3 and 4 is the most difficult time to, upon seeing a deer, your hunter comes in to an outfitter, you're hunting, you're trying to age these deer. 3 to 4 seems to be the hardest these days for me.
Yeah, because a 3-year-old here in the Midwest, most 3-year-olds are going to have a pretty decent rack on them.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, there's a lot of 3-year-olds that are going to have bigger racks than a lot of 4-year-olds.
Mm-hmm.
So you can't look at the rack whatsoever.
Right.
At 3, from 3 on, you just forget the rack. You got to start looking at the body, and that's a whole lot tougher.
Yeah, I'm with you 100% there. How many bucks have you watched or followed that have been over 8 years old?
Not many, but I can think of 2 right off the top of my head. One, my podcast partner, Terry Pierce, shot one on my farm. I called him the old guy. He'd been around so long, just had a crazy messed up rack, didn't amount to much, but I mean, it was really unique. I'd called him the old guy for 3 or 4 years.
Okay.
And when Terry shot him, he did send the teeth off on this one. I think this one was 11 years old.
Oh, wow.
And there was another buck that I watched for a long time, and I had history with him since he would have been 2.5.
Okay.
And my neighbor shot him when he was 9.5. So there's 2 bucks that lived on my farm at least part of the time that I know were that old. Any others I can't say for sure how old they were, but I know I had at least 2 over the years.
Okay. We typically kill some 7-year-old deer.
Mm-hmm.
We have killed an 8-year-old. We did the cementum age on that, and then we might have broken our record last year that we know of. I think we killed a 9-year-old, and yeah, he was a interesting rack deer. He was smaller than the year before.
Mm-hmm.
The year before, he was starting to get real freaky. So that to me was the indication that he's 9. And I've yet to send the teeth off, but we've got them.
There may be more 200-inch deer than there is 9.5-year-old bucks.
Well,
I mean, it'd be close. There's not very many of either. So that's pretty rare.
Yeah. Well, I think, for us, we try to do it off of pressure in terms of how many, people are on a farm at a certain time. Mm-hmm. And then that's only the amount of weeks that you have in a deer season. So your farms are seeing low impact. Mm-hmm. That's how we've designed it over the years. Mm-hmm. It's, who knows if it's more economical than doing all the management activities, but that seems to be a formula that's really worked for us with our outfitter.
Yep.
And so that's why I like to think that we get to see some deer of that age caliber. Mm-hmm. But it's deer hunting, so who actually, only God knows.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And then Derek asks, if we have 850 acres of bluff ground and hills, are 6 bucks over 5 years old rare? Will a dominant buck run off other mature bucks all year?
Well, I think most deer hunters don't give bucks enough credit for being individuals, having individual personalities. And they're like people. We've all got tendencies. Most of us like to sleep at night and get up but some of us get up at 5 a.m. and some of us sleep till 11 a.m. So there's tendencies, but there's also variance within those tendencies. Mm-hmm. And then there's those total outliers. There's the person that likes to be up all night and sleep during the day. And it's the same way with bucks. Some bucks will tolerate other mature bucks a whole lot more than other individual deer. Mm-hmm. And so if you've got, 850 acres, you said? 850 acres, you can hold a lot more mature bucks than what the internet will tell you.
Okay.
I'll just leave it at that. And without slamming anybody, that's probably the best way to say that part. I've seen it on my own farm where even in the rut in mid-November, these deer know, the pecking order. They know who's at the top of the totem pole and who's at the bottom. It's just like a young guy walking into his local bar. Mm-hmm. He knows the guy to leave alone because he'll kick his butt if he don't.
Right.
And he knows who he can push around a little bit.
Yeah.
And these deer are the same way. They know where they stand. They've already worked that out before the rut. Now, what happens a lot of times is that a doe will come and heat, and two bucks that are fairly equal will fight it out.
Yeah. Yeah. So something interesting, I witnessed, it was the second day of season one year, and I had a really big food plot. It's about 6 acres of turnips, and they were relatively young still. The entire bachelor group came out, and the big dog, he came out from a different area as the rest of the bachelor group.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Yep.
buck personality, but you know, that's kind of a general, to me, the monarch, the big guy, kind of is a man of his own. And then he came out to this bachelor group, and he went, and each deer, they individually honored each other in a manner that was social. And then as he got to the higher age class deer, each interaction became, for lack of a better term, more intimate. When he got to the next biggest deer, they showed each other a ton of respect, and even were kind of like licking each other's necks and stuff. Never had seen anything like that. So when you talk about it's sorted out by the time season rolls around, I couldn't agree more. Haven't seen that just understanding the social aspects of these male deer and the bachelor groups was just tremendous.
Yep.
So we're at the end for time. I'd love it if you could please just go over some of the different ways people can follow you or reach out to you if they're in interest of your consultation services or anything like that.
Yeah, so my website is higginsoutdoors.com. You can find me on social media, Facebook, Instagram, Don Higgins, Higgins Outdoors. I got a YouTube channel with a lot of videos. Chasing Giants podcast. The Chasing Giants podcast can be found on YouTube and just about every podcast platform. What else? My consulting information would be on my website. I also own Real World Wildlife Products. Well, I'm one of the co-owners of Real World Wildlife Products with some other folks. That's a seed company headquartered in Arthur, Illinois. Put a lot of food plot seed blends out. Got dealers all over the country. I think we got about 300 dealers now. Green Prairie Seed is an ag seed company that I'm also co-owner of. That's in Arthur, Illinois as well. So
Okay.
a lot of irons in the fire, but keeps me busy and keeps me out of trouble.
Awesome, man. Well, hey, thanks again for coming. Appreciate you driving down and kind of spreading the deer hunting gospel.
Well, thanks for having me, and be glad to do it anytime.
Awesome, man. Thank you.